Welcome to Frontline Memories.
Our guest in this edition is Ray Hildreth. He's a U.S. Marine Corps veteran of the Vietnam War. He's also a U.S. Army veteran. He received a Silver Star for his actions at the Battle of Hill 488 in June of 1966. And we're now up to the point where that encounter began. So June 13th, 1966 to be precise, you arrive at Hill 488. Describe the hill, first of all, and what the purpose of the mission was that day.
Okay, well, this patrol was my sixth patrol, and it's the first time that we'd done a night insertion. All the other times we'd gone out early in the morning for our insertions. And this time, Operation Kansas, we were spearheading, and the general had placed 5 different teams around the Hildreth Valley. Our team was team number 2. And our mission was to observe the valley and report any sightings of anything that we thought that needed our attention. Right away, our platoon sergeant, Sergeant Howard, saw activity and identified it as NVA and called fire missions on the activity. The very first night we were there, the 13th, we landed, we could see strings of torches down the valley, which indicated that people were moving along, and we were expected probably maybe 8 or 10 foot in between each torch with maybe a couple other people in between each torch. And so we knew there was activity down there, and then when the day got there, you could still see the activity and call the fire missions. And there were secondary explosions in some grass huts and stuff that were targeted, and so we knew that munitions were being stored there. Later, we would find out that the day that we arrived on that hill, also what was called the Sunrise Battalion had marched 90 days from North Vietnam and had just arrived in the Hildreth Valley at the same time that we were inserted on Hill 488. We would find out later, after I made a trip back to Vietnam, I met one of the NVA we fought against, and he said that was their first engagement with the Americans, and they were just arriving at that time. So we arrived on the 13th evening, called fire missions on the 14th all day long. I say all day long, of course, it wasn't every minute. There would be probably half a dozen fire missions during the daytime. Then on the 15th, the same thing, only it wasn't quite as many fire missions called. Turns out they decided they were going to come up after us on the night of the 15th. And there was an Army unit stationed in one of the villages down in the valley. They had saw that there was a large unit, battalion-sized unit, that had been gathering and appeared to be heading up Hill 488. And so that was just about dusk of the night of the 15th. And so because of that, Platoon Sergeant, Sergeant Howard, called the team leaders together and assigned perimeter defenses around the top of the hill. So we were in 2-man teams on 50% alert, which meant that one man could sleep if he wanted to or necessary, or the other stayed awake. And I guess probably a diameter would be at about 20 yards, something like that, around the hill. And about 2,300 hours, or just before that, my squad leader, Corporal Thompson, came to me, and my partner at that time was James McKinney, and said, we're going to go to 100% alert. And he moved me over about 10 yards from James McKinney. Then, as he turned to walk away, he stopped, turned back to me, and he said, don't forget, fire underneath any muzzle flashes. And that sent a chill up my back, like he was expecting something. And so a short time later, I say a short time, it could be minutes, it could be about 30, 40 minutes. I am not totally sure. Rick Benz, who was on the north side of the hill, him and his team, fire team, 3 others, were spread out. And Rick was watching, and he thought he saw something move. So he focused on it. It moved again. Then he realized, and it was only 5 or 6 feet away from him. So he fired twice, and that's what set off the battle. That was NVA scouting ahead of the platoon coming up the hill after us. Shortly after that, they threw grenades, ran back up the top of the hill. A lot of fire back and forth. It just, you might say, all hell broke loose. There was rifle fire, machine gun fire, all kinds of fire, tracers going everywhere. And then it got a short lull for a second. Somebody opened up with the AK-47. I remember this very vividly. Tom Powell's, who was a M79 man, he got hit in the gut by AK-47. He screamed, and God, you could hear that scream throughout the whole valley. He was hurt. He was hurt. I squeezed my rifle. At that point, I still hadn't fired my rifle. My head, I'm looking on the swivel. I'm looking all around. I'm listening. I'm intent. I'm just looking for anything. Then more grenades go off. And then I had told you I was in the 50% alert with James McKinney. He had been sitting with a poncho over him, so he could smoke a cigarette. Of course, he'd place a poncho over his head when he'd smoke a cigarette to hide the glow. And I remember he had that poncho over him. I heard a few shots fired, and a grenade went off, and his poncho fluttered in the air and landed no more than probably 4 or 5 feet from me, the position that I was at. And my heart was racing then because I called out to him, and there was no answer back. So at that time, I grabbed my cartridge belt, run back up the hill. I failed to mention that Thompson told me that if we got hit, I was going to be point man and to lead the platoon down the south finger of the hill down to the valley. So when I ran back up to the hill, Thompson was there, and he challenged me. And I said, "It's me, Hildreth." He said, "Okay, take a position right here." And he put me down in a position right there. I said, "Are we going to bug out of here now?" And he said, "No, we can't right now. We got somebody hurt." So they called in a medevac. Medevac come in. There was still heavy fire. Medevac tried to land, couldn't. Got run off by the NVA with their automatic weapons fire. So we knew we were stuck till morning.
What's going through your mind at this point, and how would you describe the intensity of what was happening around you?
Well, again, like I said, I still hadn't fired my weapon, and people are yelling, "I'm hit, I'm hit." And it just made me more anxious. I'm just hugging the ground and looking around, and I heard some movement. I fired my first shot. It must have been 15, 20 minutes after the initial attack, and I was just firing blind. Thought I saw something move, and I was just kind of reacting to what I thought I saw. I knew that I didn't have any friendlies in front of me, so if there was anything out there, it was all enemy.
2,300 hours, of course, it's the middle of the night. It's pitch black. So other than the muzzle fire, is there any way to guide you towards what's in front of you?
Nothing, just looking. And the hilltop was kind of barren. It had like knee-high grass. There were no trees up there. There were a few rocks, but Sergeant Howard had placed his command post against a rock that was probably about the size of a Volkswagen, about 5 foot, tall, about 4 or 5 foot, 6 foot long, like that. And that's where he had placed his CP at. And so there were a few people close to that rock, but I was probably at that time 20 foot from it on the eastern perimeter. There was nothing to hide behind. There might have been a couple rocks there. There were some, I noticed when we went back, there were maybe 12, 18 inches diameter. Would have been decent cover if I'd seen it, but there was no moonlight. There was no stars. It was overcast. We couldn't see anything. It was as dark as it could be.
What happened next?
Lots more rifle fire, grenades exploding everywhere. Then there's a lull in the firing, and one of the NVA yells out, "Marines, you die in an hour." And so Sergeant Howard says, "Laugh at them." So we did. We done a sarcastic laugh. "Ha, ha, ha, you son of bitches, you haven't got us yet. Come get us." Of course, a little bit more colorful language. That kind of quieted them down. I would find out later in 2011 when I went back to Vietnam and met that NVA fought against. I asked him, "Well, what did you think when we laughed at you?" And he says, "No, we thought you were a much larger unit." And so because of that, I believe it's why they didn't just try to overrun us. I mean, they could have, by sheer numbers, just walked across the top of the hill, and we couldn't fire enough to kill them all. That made them cautious, and they started probing again, trying to find out how big our perimeter was, which I think probably was instrumental in us surviving the night. We'd hear sticks, clack, 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 whistles blowing, and that was the NVA signaling their units where to go, what to do, how to move around the hill, where they wanted to be at. And at one point, there'd be a hail of grenades just come over the top of the hill, maybe a dozen or so, just thump, 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 thump. As soon as something would hit close to us, I, as well as some of the other guys, would just tumble down the hill about 10 foot and hug the earth as much as we can, just to keep, stay out of the way of the explosion from the grenade. Sometimes they were duds because they were using those wooden handled grenades, and sometimes they weren't duds. And then whenever grenade went off or didn't go off, then we'd crawl back up to our position where we were at previously and try to go on from there. They came at us in a wave attack, probably around 11:30, something like that. Howard was on the radio. He was calling for flares. He was calling for a box, an artillery box. For those who don't know what an artillery box is, it's a predetermined location that if we get into a problem that our artillery support can fire and the rounds would hit in a box pattern around us to protect us from people coming up from below. And the artillery support that we had, they fired the box, but it was way off to our north. So Sergeant Howard was trying to correct that and get it back down or cover around us, but he was never able to accomplish that. He kept asking for flares because the artillery would fire flares, but even they were off target as well. We didn't get a good flare presence until the flare ship arrived, a couple hours later.
What was the impact of the wave attack?
Well, it was mostly on the north side. I didn't see it. I didn't experience it. I know that a lot of the guys were getting close to being low on ammunition. Rick Benz, the squad leader on that side, come around asking for grenades or any extra ammo that I have. I gave him a couple of my grenades. My side of the hill on the east side was not heavily attacked like the north and the west side was. They were primarily coming up from that direction. Then we called them 50 calibers, but I'm not sure. They were high caliber weapons that started firing, and they started getting us in a crossfire. And whenever that happened, Adams, who was probably within arm's reach of me, one of the 50 calibers started raking across the hilltop and hit him in the back above his left shoulder. He rolled a hard right, said, I'm hit, and rolled back over into his stomach. And I said, how bad are you hit? He said, bad. And, he laughed with bad, like it just he just died in the middle of trying to say something. And when a flare popped, I could see his back. It's just a gaping wound in this, along his shoulder blade on the left side, and he was dead. Flare popped. I seen the machine gun. I positioned myself so that I could get a good sight on it, held my breath, squeezed the trigger, shot it, and I happened to have a tracer round in my rifle at that time, and I seen the tracer leave the barrel of my gun and bury itself right in the chest of the NVA. Saw him go down. Then another one came in view, and I repeated the same action and got him. Then about, 10 minutes later, approximately, another flare popped, and I seen him setting up another gun, and I was able to get that team also. And that's kind of all that happened on the east side at that time. There was a lot of activity going on the west side, though. I'd call out names. I'd say, Howard, and get an answer. Thompson, get an answer. If I didn't get an answer, then I'd have to reposition myself to cover a little bit of that area. At one time, I was the only one covering the east and the south sector of the hill. McKinney had been dead. Mascaredes was dead. Adams was dead. Carlisi was gone. So I had the whole area. So I was call out names to see who was still alive. And if I didn't respond to me, then I'd kind of kick myself around where I could face that direction to see what it's like. Then I would kick back around the other way and just would do that the rest of the evening. One time I'd called out to Thompson, and he didn't respond. So I kicked myself back around, and he was on the west side of the perimeter, near the rock where Howard had his CP. And a flare popped, and I saw a silhouette. It's like his silhouette was on his knees, reaching down like it was grabbing something. I yelled out to Thompson again. He didn't answer. I fired my rifle, and I seen the silhouette grab his face and fall backwards. I would find out later, our corpsman, Billy Holmes, saw the NVA drag Thompson down the hill. Thompson was in the hand-to-hand combat with that NVA, and had buried his K-bar into the back of the NVA. And I guess he'd been shot at point-blank range. We found him the next morning, his face blown off, and laying next to the NVA with a K-bar buried into his back. But Billy Holmes said that he felt something grab him, started to tug on him. He said then all of a sudden, the person that was grabbing him, he said his face exploded. And he said he saw him grab his face and fall backwards. Then my assumption was that was what I saw. When I yelled for Thompson, he didn't answer. And then the flare popped, and I was able to see somebody grabbing somebody laying down, and I fired the shot. And it must have been that NVA that was grabbing our corpsman, trying to drag him downhill. And then it was kind of like, I describe it like strobe lights with the flares, how they burn the way they do. And I looked over and I saw Billy Holmes, the corpsman, slow motion, dragging himself back over to the safety of the big rock. And just with the flickering of the flare stuff, like it reminded me of strobe lights. And then I turned back to the east side of the perimeter again, the east and the south side. And like I said, it was like that. I'd look for a while one direction, then look around the other way. And eventually, we started moving a little bit closer to the rock. We were getting low on ammunition, and Sergeant Howard had been calling and calling for help. And all of a sudden there was a grenade went off and a sound of an automatic weapon firing. Some of the rounds hit the rock. Whether it was a ricochet or whatever it was, I don't know what happened, but I heard Howard yell out, my balls, I'm hit, my balls. And he just kind of went silent. That's when I really started getting scared because he was like our rock. He was the man in charge. He was who we looked up to. He's the one that gave us orders. Now he's out of the fight. And so I'm just scared as I can be. I take my K-bar out and I stab it in the ground next to me. I'm ready for what's coming because I'm almost out of ammunition. And if they get close enough, I was going to grab my K-bar and take one more if I could. And then a few minutes later, the Huey gunship was diverted from they were escorting, I guess, a medevac chopper and got diverted to Hill 488. And the guy's name was Perryman. And I talked to him later, and he said he could look out to the west and see the tracers and stuff going over Hill 488. They were all one color. Of course, we didn't have tracers. We didn't have any machine guns with us. They were all one color, the blue NVA tracers. When he got there, he got to our position. Howard came to and started talking to him. And the call sign for the gunship was Klondike. And our call sign was Carnival Time. And so that was a talk going back and forth. Klondike, shoot that guy. He's coming to tail after us. And Klondike says, I can't see you. Where are you at? Because it was dark and all they could see was muzzle flashes. They couldn't tell if it was NVA muzzle flashes or if it was our muzzle flashes. He said, I don't know where to fire. And he said, mark your position so we can't route of flares. And Howard got an idea. He had a flashlight with a red lens on it. He said, I got a flashlight with a red lens. And Klondike says, okay, give us your red light. And he started flicking the red light off and on. Klondike could see our positions then. And Howard said, fire 20 meters around our position. We'll take care of the rest. So that's what they started doing. They started making strafing runs, firing what they thought would be 20 meters around from that hilltop. Then another Huey arrived on a station, and they kind of traded, making passes back and forth. Then they run out of ammunition, and they go back to Chulai, or actually, it wasn't Chulai. It would be, I forget, they were stationed just north of Chulai. I forget the name of the place where they were at. They go back, refuel, rearm, come back out and make more passes. Everybody was wounded, and I was thinking, how come I haven't been wounded? Things were going through my head. Am I being saved for something, be taken prisoner or what? I didn't know. And so I guess it was that guilt feeling you get for thinking that you're not part of the unit. Everybody else got shot. Why me? Am I being saved for some sinister reason? There was more automatic weapon fire, hit the rock next to Howard, ricocheted off, and something hit me in the side. And believe it or not, I had a big sigh of relief. My guilt, as you want to call it, was gone. I'd been hit. Luckily, it wasn't a bad hit. I felt underneath my jacket to feel if there any blood, and there wasn't. I would forget about it later. And later, when I got back the next morning, taking a shower, the water run into the wound. It kind of stung. When I was washing myself, I went to battalion aid station and got treated for it. It didn't require much more. I had a very small bandage on it, very small. It gave me a sigh of relief, made me feel like part of the unit again. Yeah, I know it's strange sounding, but that's the way I felt. And then they were coming up again into another wave attack. The Colonel Sullivan was back at the CP at Chulai, and he's been talking to Howard back and forth on the radio. And then he was trying to call Howard to ask him for situation, and Howard wasn't answering. Howard was busy fighting. So after 2 or 3 calls from Sullivan to Howard got on the phone and says, I'm busy, damn it, and just threw it down. And he kept the mic keyed, and Sullivan could hear all the fire and all the activity and the grenades, everything going around. So Howard cut him real short and said, I'm busy. I can't talk to you right now. Sullivan contacted TAC Air at Division, requested all available TAC Air to come to our aid. So F-4 Phantoms from Da Nang, A-4 Skyhawks from Chulai, and F-8 Crusaders off of carriers all converged around the hilltop, dropping 250 500-pound bombs. The bombs would explode, and it would shake us, inches up off the ground. They were exploding that close to us. That slowed down the attack of the NVA for a while. I guess The jets showed up probably around 3 a.m. would be my best guess, 3 to 3:30, something like that. Whenever they expended all their ammunition, they left. Things kind of got quiet for a while. There was a lull and the firing, and everybody was saying that they were out of ammunition or almost out. And Howard said, "Throw rocks." And the reason by throwing the rocks, they'd think there might be a grenade, and they would move, and we'd have a better target to fire at. For about three or four until sunrise, it was just kind of hit and miss. There wasn't a lot of heavy fighting at that time. At, what I'd say, it was at about 5:30, 5:25, something like that. It had gone quiet. Howard yelled out, "Reveille goes in 25 minutes." And there was a VC that answered back with firing his automatic weapon. Turns out he would be a lone sniper that had been left behind. And he was the one that we tried to move around a little bit and see us and fire. And then when 6 o'clock come around, Howard yelled out, Reveille, time to get up." We knew if we held out till morning that reinforcements would arrive. The first reinforcement that arrived he was a colonel, new commander of the MAG Marine Air Group 36. He hovered over our position about 20, 30 foot above ground, gave us a thumbs up, and dropped a yellow smoke for the medevac to come in. That sniper that had been left behind saw him, and Perryman also, the other Huey chopper that had been there all night, was behind him, and the sniper opened up and got both birds. The front bird that had the colonel in it, lieutenant colonel, kind of fluttered a little bit and then took a nosedive down to the valley. The Perryman, the bird behind him, followed him down, but his radio was shot out. He couldn't make any contact with him. Turns out that the colonel had been shot in the leg. He bled to death before they could get him out of the chopper. And then it was probably 2 hours later that the reactionary group, Charlie 15, 1st Battalion, 5th Marines, the sun come up, and I was facing east, and I could see the choppers lift up over the cloud cover, and they traveled south and come back up from the south and landed a few hundred yards away from our position and started making their way over to our positions. The first one to get to me was a Lance Corporal named Terry Reddick, and I asked him for a fresh magazine. He handed me the magazine, and I said, "Stay low." I said, "Sniper's got his pen down." So he kind of stood up a little bit, looking, "Where? I don't see him." The sniper opened up, hit him in the head, and he just kind of went down, just kind of flickering his hand like that. He died right there next to me. Then I had a lieutenant named Ron Meyer. He had a nickname Stump because he was short and stocky. He come up there, and he got 5 or 6 hand grenades, and he had Howard try to point out to him the location of the sniper, and he tried to lob the grenades over there to get him. And so, throwing all the grenades, he couldn't do it because he was going blind. So then he grabbed a K-bar, put it in his mouth, grabbed a couple more hand grenades, started crawling down to the sniper. He made it about 10 or 15 foot, then raised up to orient himself. When it happened, the sniper shot him. Then a call went out for the corpsman. Corpsman came up, crawled down to check Stump, and whenever he raised up, he was shot. Another call went out for another corpsman, and the other corpsman crawled down, and he could see that Stump was dead already, the way his eyes were at his head, and the other corpsman was still alive. So they formed a chain, human chain, and they pulled the corpsman and Stump back up. The corpsman died a few days later in the hospital, and like I said, Stump was already dead. So Charlie 15 lost 3 to that sniper. And then there was also a FO, forward observer, with Charlie 15, and he called in an F-8 Crusader and had the Crusader make strafing runs on the sniper that's up behind. And you could see whenever the pilot flew by over the hilltop, he was so close to us. Clearly, you could make out his eyes, and you could see clearly everything about him. That's how close he was. He would start firing a quarter of a mile away with 20-millimeter cannons, and the ground was ripped up everywhere. But he was never able to get that sniper. And eventually, Charlie 15 sent a squad to envelop the sniper. So they went down the east side of the slope and made their way around and came up on him from the east while he was looking up toward the south, started firing at him, and he turned around surprised, and they were able to get to him in time, and they took him out with a bayonet charge. So that's when the battle was over, and they were able to start taking people out. After the battle, I got up. There was me and two others able to walk off the hill unassisted. You got on the chopper. I walked around the hill with the 5th Marines, checking out the bodies for any intel. And I happened to see one of the NVA move down toward where the sniper was at. And I yelled out, "There's one moving," and raised my gun, fired twice, and getting ready to fire a third time. And the Marine beside me said, "Hey, you got him, man, you got him." I was just kind of zoned in, I guess you might say, at that time. I was going to keep firing until I was sure I got him. I picked up some weapons. That was one of the things we'd do in recon. If we'd done an ambush or something of that nature, we'd take whatever intel we could, weapons to bring back so they could do what they did for intel for the weapons, where they came from. And so myself, Bosley, and Mulvihill were the 3 that were able to walk off the hill, and everybody else had to be carried off. We were the last ones to leave, and we were on the chopper that McKinney was on. So a very solemn flight back to July Hospital, and the wind was flapping through the open of the helicopter. It was the H-34 helicopter. The poncho that was over McKinney was flapping in his wing, exposing his face. I knelt down and tucked it underneath his head and body where it wouldn't flap anymore. And when we got to Battalion Mid, they unloaded him. Bosley got off, Moho got off. I went on, flew on back to LC at 1st Recon Battalion, and turned over my weapons and stuff there. Went to my tent, took a shower, realized that I'd been wounded, went over to the Battalion Med Station. They doctored me up. And after that, I was expecting to go back out in the field. I was expecting, I got promoted to corporal. I was expecting to go back and be a squad leader. Colonel Sullivan had other ideas. He had been in Bunker Hill, as was Howard, in Korea, and kind of knew what combat was like. So he told me, no, Hildreth, you're not going back. You're going to be up here in H&S County, pick a job. Norman, when he came back from the hospital, he said, I'd like to be the colonel's driver. So he got assigned to be the colonel's driver. Bosley, he come back and said, I want to be a motor T. So he became a truck driver. Cosgrove said, I want to be in supply. So he took a job in supply. They asked me what I wanted, and I said I had a choice of battalion mail orderly or S&C clerk, S&C secret confidential file clerk. So I became battalion mail orderly and special service NCO for the rest of my time there. And then I returned to in-country January 10th is when I rotated back, got assigned to Camp Virginia, North Carolina. A little later, we went to the Medal of Honor ceremony for Sergeant Howard, and Reader's Digest did a story on us, the May 1968 issue. And that story, they say we were the most decorated unit for its size, 193 years of American military history. 13 Silver Stars, 4 Navy Crosses, and Medal of Honor, as well as 18 Purple Hearts were given in the battle. In addition, there were a couple of Silver Stars given to people in Charlie 15. Also, there was another air group that had one of their gunners on their chopper had been killed. Altogether, that engagement took 11 lives. They estimated we killed 200 of them. Within 20, 30 yards of that hilltop and the rock, there were 43 dead in VA. And drag marks indicated there were dozens more that had been hauled off. When I went back in 2011 and I met the NVA we fought against, I asked him, because I kept wondering, how come they didn't just run over the top of us? So I had questions I wanted answered. I asked him how many was in his unit, or first asked him how many died. And then he was very coy, so how many did you see? And I told him, and he says, well, there were 44. I would find out later from the guide, whenever he took the NVA, his name was Tien, home that night, he talked to another man that remembered the battle. He said, no, there was many, many, many more people in VA that died that night, not just the 43, the 44 that he said was there around the hill. But I wanted to know. And that's one of the reasons I went back. I was able to reach a travel agency in North Vietnam, told them about the battle, and they found the lieutenant who was the platoon leader there. And they said, it's his first battle. He remembers it very well, and I met him when I went there.
Just a couple more questions in response to that incredible story. I do want to go back for a moment to the point where you took out 2 machine gun positions with being armed only with your rifle. What's going through your mind in that situation?
Just fear and anxiety. And, I've got to stop this guy. I mean, they had us in a crossfire. He had just killed Adams. And so I just had to take a breath, use my training as a sniper, and fire. Something had to be done. I had to get him, had to take him out. It was just fortunate that I didn't have to adjust much to see him, to get him in my sights. And then when it happened again, they started putting the crew back in again. I didn't take as much time with that shot. I was more anxious, I guess, on the second time than I was the first time.
Ray, you mentioned the incredible number of honors within the unit of that size, the most decorated unit of its size in military history. 18 Purple Hearts, 13 Silver Stars, you being among them, 4 Navy Crosses, 1 Medal of Honor. What does it mean to you that their sacrifice, their service was honored so richly as a result of what was known about that battle?
They were honored, but, it wasn't enough. I don't mean that to be snarky or anything, but they gave their life. Nothing can make up for that. It can give a little consolation maybe to their families, but I think about this every day. There's not a day goes by that it doesn't come up. There are only 3 of us out of the 12 that survived, left alive. Joe Coswell lives in Texas, and there's another guy, Martinez, which was his first patrol with us. He was a radioman. He's here in Tulsa. We didn't have much chance to become close friends because he'd only been in the platoon 2 or 3 days when it happened. Thompson had been in the platoon maybe 4 or 5 days, maybe a week before the patrol. That was his first patrol. Carlisi was from New York. That was his first patrol. He didn't look like he belonged to the Marine Corps. He just, you get a sense of some people, but he died valiantly. He died like a Marine. He died fighting, but he sure didn't look like he belonged there. After his first patrol, Bosley had only been on like 2 patrols. Glaw, he was an M79 man. He'd only been on 1 patrol before that. So they were all relatively new. The only ones that had been there for a while was my team leader, Mascarenas, who died. And I could hear him, I didn't mention this earlier, I could hear him sucking blood all night long, maybe 10 foot away. He didn't die until later on the medevac. He died en route back to the hospital, but he made it all night long, breathing and sucking blood. Powell's was screaming like a banshee. He finally calmed down, but he screamed. You can hear him all throughout the valley. Other people, I'm hit, I'm hurt. This runs through my mind.
Ray, just a moment or two left in our conversation here. When you look back at your service, and obviously this is, as you mentioned many times, the thing that comes to your mind every day, is there something you're most proud of from your service?
That I went and served. Well, I stated in my book that some people called us baby killers. Okay? We didn't have the luxury of choosing to go to Vietnam. I really didn't think I was going to Vietnam when I joined. It didn't enter my mind. Somebody else asked me, well, aren't you afraid you're going to Vietnam? And I just kind of rolled it off. Nah, they got enough people over there. They don't need me. It never entered my mind that I was going to Vietnam until in boot camp when they read our orders. Hildreth, you're going to the 3rd Replacement Company, Okinawa. Congratulations, you're going to Vietnam. At that point in time, then I started thinking differently about it. We didn't run off to Canada. We didn't burn our draft cards. We joined. Even though I wasn't thinking about Vietnam, they said, that's where you're going. Well, that's what I signed up for. My country says they need me there, and that's where I'm going.
Lastly, sir, what does it mean to you to be able to share your story?
I like letting people know about it, especially today since it's been so long ago. I think people should know the sacrifices that some of us have made on their behalf. For several years, people wouldn't even talk about Vietnam. As a matter of fact, my wife, we got married in 2000. In 2003, she worked for the University of Tulsa. I said, you work at the university. Do you know anybody up there that, maybe is a writer or be a ghostwriter? I think I'd like to tell the story of Vietnam. She said, oh, no, people want to forget about that. I said, no, I think there's an audience for it. And then whenever I found out that Charles Sassler was doing a book signing, I went to meet him. I didn't get there in time to meet him, but they gave me his contact information. I contacted him, told him about the story. He said, let me talk to my agent. And the agent says, yeah, we could sell a story like this. People want to know this. And so Simon & Schuster gave us the best offer. We started writing the book, and it was released in October of 2003. I would hear people say, thank you for the service, but it didn't sound sincere. And like I say in the book, more often now I hear it coming from people, and it is sounding sincere. A lot of people just want to sweep it under the rug or don't even want to talk about it. I think it should be talked about. People should know how those of us in the military sacrifice ourselves for the good of the country.
Ray, again, it's an incredible story of service, and the way that you honor those who fought alongside of you as you tell that story is extraordinarily appropriate as well. There are no words to properly express our thanks, especially to those who gave their last full measure of devotion there. But we thank you extraordinarily for your time today, and we thank you as much as words can for the service you gave to our country then and for many years afterwards. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Greg. You're welcome.
Our guest today has been Ray Hildreth. He's a U.S. Marine Corps veteran of the Vietnam War. He's also a U.S. Army veteran. He received a Silver Star for his actions at the Battle of Hill 488 in June of 1966 in Vietnam.
This is Greg Columbus, and thanks for listening to Frontline Memories. You can also follow Frontline Memories on Facebook. Subscribe to my YouTube channel for full oral histories and special features. Thanks again for listening, and please join us next time for Frontline Memories.